Welcome back to the first episode of a new season of Red Tinted Glasses. As many of you will notice, Calum is not joining me, but I'm delighted to be rejoined by Grant Campbell of Campbell's Football and also by former Aberdeen goalkeeper David Preece. Gentlemen, welcome to the show.
Thanks very much, Glen.
Thanks for having me on, yeah.
No, it's great to have you both on, and Grant, thank you for reaching out to David and getting him on in the first place. David, we'll go to you first. You know, former Aberdeen goalkeeper, 100 appearances for the club, but you also spent time in Sweden with Östersunds. It'll be really great to pick your brains over both. But if we look at Aberdeen first, you know, how do you look back on your time at the club?
Yeah, I mean, I only look back with fond memories at the moment. I think it's easy to it's easy to forget about the tough times that I had in the first couple of seasons. But overall, it's, you know, Aberdeen's become a club that's really close to my heart, you know, and it's a real shame that I've not really been able to get back much since I left. So it would be nice to get back there soon anyway. Yeah,
no, and it's great that you've managed to come on and join us this evening. And the purpose of this podcast is to preview our European game against BK Hacken from Sweden. And you did have a taste of European football, and maybe not happy memories, we should say, with the first European game you had was the defeat we had on away goals to Bohemians, but then maybe slightly better with the Nistru Otachi game in 2002, followed by a narrow defeat to Hertha Berlin. But do you have fond memories of those European games as well?
Yeah, of course. I mean, my involvement was, as you know, was only from the bench, really. But
yeah.
I mean, but it's still it's great experience. I mean, especially when we went out to Moldova, where to play Nistru Otachi, that was a real experience. A real experience, you know. I remember we went to. Myself, Ryan S, and I think Mark Pete was with us at the time. We went out to do a little bit of training the day before the game, and we found an athletic stadium, and we walked there. It took about 15 minutes to walk there, and then when we got there, the army were doing like a rehearsal for a parade, for a military parade that they were going to be doing through the town. So we couldn't use that, and it was it was just I mean the pitch itself was a bit of a. You'd think there'd been blown up bombs on the pitch as well, because it was very bubbly. But yeah, that was a great experience. But also when we played in the Olympic Stadium against Hertha Berlin, which Peter Kerr played brilliantly that night, you know. And but we were really unlucky to go out with I think it was a last minute goal.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, last minute goal, and with a goal ruled out about 5 minutes before then, after Russell had hit the bar. So, but certainly, you know, I think a lot of people that were over in Berlin said it was probably one of the best trips that they'd been on. I think the atmosphere was certainly electric that night.
Yeah, it was. I mean, it was a shame that, I mean, I'm not sure how many more fans there would have been at the game anyway, but I think they were just redeveloping it for the World Cup in 2006. So it was a bit of a building site as well at the time, but they did their best to try and make it accommodating. But it was just great experiences. I wish we'd had more.
Yeah. Well, we've been blessed with the Euros. Football's gone to Rome. Sorry, we had to mention it, David. But the focus now returns to club football as Aberdeen begin their 7th consecutive season in Europe. Sadly, though, fans will likely miss the pilgrimage to Gothenburg for the away leg. We're hoping to hear some news on the application for 8,000 fans for the home game in Pittodrie. But what we're going to do, since we've got David with us on the show, we're going to get some hopefully inside knowledge into all things Swedish football. So we'll take a look at BK Hacken themselves. They're nicknamed the Wasps, so hopefully it won't be a sting in the tail for Aberdeen in Europe early on. But with no away goals this season, Grant, in Europe, do you think that's an immediate boost for Aberdeen?
I think it is in some respects. You know, I think it is almost a straight shootout, both games. You know, I think there's an opportunity to actually play with a bit more of a freestyle in the game. You know, obviously it won't be an easy game. You know, I'm sure we'll go on to talk about it. They have a very experienced squad of players. I think it's a game that, or certainly a tie that Stephen Glass will want to build some momentum going into the new season. And the fact that so many times in the past Scottish football clubs have been undone by the away goals rule, maybe it does give them an opportunity to progress in the tie.
It does. And David, I think when the draw was made, a lot of us seen the league position of Hacken. They were sitting joint bottom at the time, albeit they've changed managers since then and picked up a bit of form. But do you think with us just looking at the table and going, oh, we're playing a bottom of the league side, are we underestimating them?
Yeah, it'd be far too simple just to say that. They've had a terrible start to the season for them. I think in the couple of seasons I was in Sweden, they were very much. I don't know whether they were underachieving by even just finishing where they did, because they seem to have a couple of dips where it was where it just stopped them from challenging for the title. They've certainly got a group of players that could challenge. If bit of good form, good fortune with injuries, they definitely have got a squad capable enough of mounting a title challenge. But I think Häcken's one of these teams, a little like there's another team called Norrköping in Sweden where they're not the EFK Gothenburgs or AIK Stockholm or Malmö, but they are very established sides in the Swedish league, and they shouldn't be underestimated. Should not be underestimated.
Yeah, and I think you touched on there, and so is Grant, on the experience. They're currently in action tonight. We're recording this on Monday night, and they're in action away to Kalmar. And one of their experienced defenders, Martin Olsen, many of you will remember from his days in the Premiership with Norwich and Blackburn. He's got himself on the score sheet. They've also got Joona Toivo, who started all three of Finland's Euro 2020 games. Alongside in central defence. Re-signed former midfielder this week, Samuel Gustafsson, who left the club in the late 2000s for Torino, previously playing 68 times and scoring 12 goals for the club before his move to Italy. He rejoins them, but will only feature for the club in next week's game against Norrköping, hopefully pronounced that as well as David did. But they do have international experience through the under-21 systems for Iceland, Sweden, and their goal scorer against AIK, Ali Youssef, recently played for Tunisia. So, David, you touched on their experience, but is that something you found in the Swedish league, that there's a lot of these young, hungry players are getting international experience, and it is actually quite a high quality league?
I mean, yeah, definitely. It's a very tactical league. I think a lot of it's, if you think that more or less half the teams play on grass, half of them play on 3G. So the 3G pitches sort of lend themselves to being a bit more tactical and technical games, and it's certainly got that way certainly over the last 10 years anyway. And it's a strange one, because I always talk with some of the coaches that I used to work with in Sweden, and we always try to compare it to, how would Malmö do? What would Malmö probably be like a top-end championship club? And there's a big difference between the big clubs and the little clubs, even though, it's like any other league, on any given day, everybody can beat anybody. But there is a big difference if you look at the likes of Varberg's, the size of their stadium and where they are to people like Malmö, EFK Gothenburg, like I said about Djurgården, Hammarby, playing these wonderful 25,000 all-seater stadiums with roofs on, and they're just beautiful, But it's the one. I mean, it's a little bit of a cliche, but they find playing against physical sides, a real challenge. A real challenge, and a lot of that's to do with the 3G pitch as well. You don't get the natural sort of, on a grass pitch, you can press really hard, and it's it on natural grass. But when you're on 3G, you've got to be really careful. You've got to sort of put the brakes on a little bit quicker, and obviously with people with tackling and things like that. So it does it does make a big difference. That and it's obviously something that Aberdeen will have to contest with when they go over to Gothenburg.
Mm-hmm.
But it's certainly something that they shouldn't worry about. I mean, the 3G pitches over there are just are really good to play on. It's obviously not like the old style ones that you find a big difference between grass and the 3G.
Yeah, and Grant, I suppose looking at the stats of Hacken, they've not kept a clean sheet in the league since the 6th of December. Obviously, continuing that trait again tonight. But equally, Aberdeen have not kept a clean sheet under Stephen Glass's reign, including into the pre-season friendly against Cali last week. So, is that going to be maybe we're going to see goals in this tie?
Well, it's certainly something that I would be a bit concerned about, the fact that we've not kept a clean sheet under Stephen Glass yet. I do think that that's something he will be constantly addressing. Be interesting to see some of the dynamics at the back this year, how that's going to set up and how the style of football he puts into the team will affect that. But I do think Aberdeen have got in players that I think can hurt this team, but I do think there is weaknesses still to be addressed, and as you said, I think it could be quite an open game. Whether it will be or not, we'll obviously have to wait and see.
Yeah, and David, with Hacken facing an away trip to Norrköping before flying to Aberdeen, do you think that could, I know because of some of the games in Sweden is a bit geographical, a bit of travel involved, would that maybe have any sort of bearing on the tie?
No, I mean, Norrköping is just sort of in the south to the east, and obviously Gothenburg's in the west. That won't take much out of them, but it will be a tough game for them. Norrköping have got a very good side, and they're and I think they're third at the moment, winning again yesterday. So it's so that'll be a real tough game for them. It won't be any there won't be any sort of they won't be able to rest any players, if that was an option anyway, So that could be a tough tie for them.
Yeah. So there you go, Grant.
No, it's okay. Obviously, David, Hacken have managed to find a little bit of form in recent weeks. How much more of a banana skin tie is this for Aberdeen than maybe it was when it was drawn a few weeks back?
I think for me, it's always has been. I think that being bottom of the league when the draw was made, there was always going to be a time when their form picked up. They've always been, the last few years they've been a top 5 club. They've, a real core of strong players that are still there. The striker Ramirez, he left the club for 6 months to a season. He just come back again. So, and he was a real miss for them last season. They actually, they could have done a lot better last year. They were just missing that, somebody who would, like a bit of a target man who complemented everything around him. So I always thought that they'd have an upturn. But also I thought about the new manager coming in as well. I think it would have been better if Andreas Alm had still been in there, because he'd been in there 4 or 5 seasons. It looked like it was just getting a little bit stale, and obviously he's got to Denmark now, and it's probably the right time for him. But with the new manager coming in, if I was the new manager coming in, I wouldn't be changing a hell of a lot. It probably just needed a change of them to hear a different voice again. And just give them a little lift, because, like I said, they've got some very good players and some very good players who I'm really surprised they still have there.
Yeah, but I mean, would Hacken be confident of drawing a team like Aberdeen? I mean, what's the feeling been like over there in Sweden?
Well, to be honest, I'm not sure. I've not really read much of it, the Swedish press over the last couple of months, but I think they'd feel very confident. To be honest with you, I think they would. I think they would be looking at it, in an old cliched style, saying it will be like it'll be a more physical game, and that's what they've got to guard against. But I think that they'll see it as an opportunity as well, because, like I said, they do have very good players, but it's always difficult to. I remember when Aberdeen played FC Copenhagen, all those years ago in the Europa League, and Uefa Cup as it was then, and I was really fearful that night for Aberdeen because the FC Copenhagen side that was then was like the Martin O'Neill Celtic of previous years. And they were very strong. They'd had some great beating Manchester United in the Champions League. They had some really good results. Got through into to the knockout stage of the Champions League, and they just couldn't cope with with the crowd. And obviously Aberdeen were great that night. And I think that's given the opportunity. Did you say there was going to be 8,000 fans possibly at that game?
The club have applied for a maximum of 8,000 fans. Obviously, that's down to, I think, local council and also government restrictions. So maybe we'll see no fans. We might see maybe a couple of thousand, but I think the maximum we're going to put forward for is 8,200. But it's a good point. How much will, if there isn't any fans, would that actually benefit Hacken? Because while I was watching their game last weekend against AIK, and obviously they've started getting fans back in over there in Sweden, so they would have the benefit in the return leg of a home support being there backing them.
Yeah, but I mean, I know that Hacken they're a Gothenburg club in a place called, I think it's Hisingen, just outside Gothenburg, but they really don't get many fans. It's a nice small stadium, but it's I don't think they'll get 3,000 in there. Obviously there might be a lot more in because it's a UEFA Cup game, and obviously if I'm not sure if Aberdeen can take any fans or what, but
I don't know. I don't think so.
In a usual game, there's probably about 3,000 there. So it's very much a club it's a small club that's been sustained in, they probably have a decent budget, but they've been sustained by they have a youth tournament there in Gothenburg called the Gothia Cup, and I think it's either their owners or the club that organised that, and it creates a lot of money for them. So that's how they're allowed. That's how they can afford to obviously give good contracts to experienced players, even though they're not the biggest club.
And I just want to pick up on one of the points that I made earlier about they haven't kept a league clean sheet since the 6th of December, but I should say that they did obviously keep clean sheets in the semi-final and final of the Cup, which is why they found themselves in Europe, unfortunately losing the final to Hammarby. But just as a former player, David, I just wanted to know what your thoughts on the fact that they'll have played 5 games, 3 competitive and 2 friendly, and Aberdeen will only have played 3 friendly games, but they've been splitting. The game we had against Inverness was 45 minutes against Inverness and then 45 minutes against the under-18s to try and get the whole squad 90 minutes into their legs. Will something like that be an advantage for Hacken, or are fans reading too much into that?
No, I think it'll definitely be an advantage when you look at their preparation now. Really, will have started in January because clubs go back for pre-season in January. They'll have a 3-month pre-season period where, obviously, even this year they went abroad. And I was still at Östersunds in pre-season, and we went to Spain. So they'll have went abroad as well. Then the league starts. They play 8 games, and then they had it was a 3 or 4 week break.
Yeah, for the Euros almost.
yeah, exactly. And then they'll have still been training through that, and then they're back into games again. So they're really, they're coming up to the middle part of their season now. So fitness shouldn't be a problem for them whatsoever. I think that the one thing with that is positive for Aberdeen is that until last season, because of COVID, when all the games had to be crammed in because we started this season a lot later, it was delayed. Swedish teams only play once a week. Yeah. And even then, like they always do what they've done now. You have you play the first 9 to 12 games, and then you have a few weeks break, and then they're back into it again. and there's very rarely is there, I think maybe 1 or 2 midweek games, and when there is midweek games like there was last year, they go crazy because the players, because they're not used to it, the players can't handle that.
Okay.
So like, you know, what is it still on Thursday nights? It is,
yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly. You know, so it gives them a little bit time to recover from the game on Sunday. But I think you'll probably get more of the cumulative effect in the second leg. So where they're playing weekend, weekend, and then the midweek. That'll be the one where I think Aberdeen can take advantage of that game.
I just want to hear your thoughts on that.
It's certainly very interesting. I mean, David, from your time in Sweden, obviously with Östersunds, how would you compare Hacken to a specific Scottish club? I mean, do you think it's very difficult to judge them? Where would you see them?
Oh, that's a good question. I would say, I mean, it's a good question. I would say that they're like Livingston, actually. They remind me a lot of Livingston because of the stadium's very sort of like very new but small, and but like I said, they have financial backing as well, you know. So it's probably a Livingston with a good financial backing, I would say.
Oh, well, that might help Aberdeen, Glen, because Aberdeen don't have a bad record on the old Astro.
Yeah, well, unless it's an Astro similar to Hamilton, thankfully we won't need to see that in the league this year. But all in all, our record on AstroTurf's actually been pretty impressive, if memory serves well.
When we go to Hamilton.
Exactly, yeah.
I mean, David, the standard of football and in respective leagues is often questioned by many commentators. I mean, how does the standard of Swedish football compare to Scotland, in your opinion?
Yeah, I think the top 6, 7 sides, you know, can probably match that of more than match that of the SPL. I think you know, you still have your big sides. Malmo, you know, historically huge side, you know, European Cup finalists, AFK Gothenburg, UEFA Cup winners with Sven. So it's they have a long history of, you know, of success in Europe as well, and of course it's been difficult. It's the same as Scotland. I think, you know, trying to keep up with the big boys it's been impossible. But, you know, along with some good recruitment, and what you often find is a lot of these big clubs as well, they end up being the sort of a bit like an OAP's home, but for the successful Swedish players who have been out in Europe all their careers, and then when they come home, they spend 2 or 3 years at the club. So like Ola Toivonen, who's at Malmo now, you know, these big players have had really good careers across Europe, and they go back down to retire. But and Sebastian Larsson obviously at the AIK, but it's I think that's what's a negative for the Spanish league, Swedish league, is that any young player, you know, they get snapped up straight away by a club in Europe, and then they're off. And so you often find that maybe there's not that many great young players coming through, even though the Hacken do have a few of their own. But they often tend to be sort of non-Swedish players anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, the new manager, Per Mathias Hogmo, certainly getting an impact from Hacken over the last couple of weeks, especially with that win over EIK. So, be interested to see if they can keep that new manager bounce, so to speak, heading into this tie.
Yeah, I mean, even though that EIK were missing a few players because of I think we're missing 3 or 4 players because of the Euros as well. It was still a very good win for them. Very good win for them. They're still a strong side regardless. And I think that, of course, the manager, I was watching an interview with the manager last week before his first game, the week before. And he's somebody he's very much a player's manager. You know, he's very much like I didn't know what to expect, because, you know, when I think of Norwegian coaches, I thought it being very sort of, I don't know, a little bit old school.
Mm.
So that's not to be disrespectful, but he is very sort of very much into. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but he's very much in the way of trying to get the best out of his players by other means too, as well. Being very sort of on a human level, a personal level, and to be honest, I think that's like I said, it's been a great appointment for them, because that's all they needed. I think they have some very good players, and they just needed them to. And they're also missing a few players as well. There's a guy called Iran Dust, who's probably their star player. There's been a lot of talk about him going to Holland or Belgium or France, and he's been missing. So he'd be one to look out for if he was getting fit anytime soon.
Yeah, and you mentioned their striker Alexander Yeremyev. He's our current top scorer with 5 goals this season. Ali Yusuf scored again tonight, so that's 2-2 for him. But just kind of, is that like a physical striker that we would really have to be wary of? Do you think they'll use that as a target man and then play off of him? Would that kind of be their style?
Yeah, but it's not for them to go long. But his job is to be number 9, and he does it very well. I think the first season I was in Sweden, he's probably the best striker in the league, and I can't remember where he went. Maybe it was either it was Germany actually. Yeah, I think it was Germany he went to, either Bundesliga 1 or 2. But he's in. For me, he's integral to what they missed last season before he came back. And the good thing. I think the good thing for Stephen Glass is that they will play the same way as they always have done over the past few seasons. 4-2-3-1, inverted wide men, and they'll attack the same way. They have a right back called Godswill Ekpolo, who started off his youth career at Barcelona. I think he's Nigerian, and I'm surprised he hasn't. For me, he looks the perfect English Championship fullback. Athletic, he carries the ball really well. He's good for a goal because he goes forward, passes it, and keeps on driving into the box for a return pass, and. He'll be, for me, he'll be a big danger. But like I said, they've missed, like I said, they've missed Iran Dust, and there was Yassine who left the club at the end of last season. Both of them were big goal threats for them, and they've got some young players, Yusuf Heinze, Volomark. They're all around 2021, and and they probably just need them, another season out of them. For them to get into the level where they can be a real threat again. Yeah,
I noticed that Volomark's playing tonight, as is Godswill Ekpolo, so will certainly be ones to watch out now. I know we've only got a few minutes more of your time, David, and it's been a real pleasure having you on Red Tinted Glasses and getting that insight into Swedish football. I'm very thankful of you giving up your time to join us. I just want to pick your brains on one thing associated with Aberdeen before you go. It's around the goalkeeping situation. So last season, towards the end of the season, obviously Joe Lewis picked up a bit of a rib injury that saw Gary Woods come into the first team and feature. Do you think that with there obviously being no clean sheets kept for Aberdeen so far, and Stephen Glass maybe wanting to play from the back, that style maybe suits Gary Woods, what would you say for Joe Lewis? Would he maybe be worried about that?
No, I mean, even at Joe's age, I think you have to adapt. He's been asked to play one way with Derek, and obviously I think speaking to Stephen, he wants to play a different way. Of course he does, but just about him adapting. And I think Joe's been such a brilliant goalkeeper for Aberdeen in his time there that I know that. Last season probably wasn't his best out of all the seasons he's been there, but also there's lots of context to that as well, and around how the team were playing as well, and coming to the end of Derek's time as well. It's I think the whole club maybe felt a little bit how would I put it? There was you know,
there was a bit of a malaise, wasn't there? I thought there was a bit of a malaise.
Yeah, exactly. And then so that's obviously changed now, and I think that maybe, you know, if Stephen's going to try and be more expansive, then I think people have to be a lot more patient and realise that you will lose goals because of it. You will, you know, if you're going to be more expansive, you are going to lose more goals. You know, you know, every Manchester City have got it. You know, Pep Guardiola is obviously, he's got everything. You know, everything works a dream for him. You know, from defence to forwards and the way he plays, it's, you know, it's not just about being brilliant, you know, with the football, they're brilliant without it as well. And obviously Stephen will approach that conundrum as well. But of course, you know, they've been very good defensively over the time with Derek. And like I said, you know, when a team changes its philosophy, you know, it's not going to happen overnight. I think it's probably helped Stephen that, you know, there's been a lot of players left last season. So, you know, so even though it's a challenge to gel all these new players together when they come in, it's still, you know, at least you're working for, you know, you're not working against what everyone did with the manager before. Everyone's working from a fresh. So, like I said, you know, it probably needs a little patience to begin with, but hopefully we won't need any patience and everything will start great.
Yeah, let's hope so. And do you think, we've got a question from John Bleasdale for you, David? So, you know, for those of you that are tuning in, if you've got any questions, make sure you tweet us at @RTG_podcast. If you're watching on YouTube, great. Make sure you subscribe. You can submit questions in the comments. But David, do you think the captaincy would have affected Joe Lewis's performances at all? Or do you think that sort of rhetoric that was touted last season is just a load of nonsense?
I mean, the only person who can answer that is Joe himself, obviously. But I know from my own experiences that if, you know, you can take far too much responsibility, you know, that armband can weigh really heavy on you. You know, it can be when you've only got yourself to focus on. Yeah. And then all of a sudden you're given that responsibility. It's how you deal with that responsibility and how you approach it. And if you know, if you take on, you know, like if you take on responsibility, you're responsible for everyone, and things don't go well, and then you start blaming yourself a little bit more, then, you know, it can affect your performances. And I know, you know, I was captain of Silkeborg when I went to Denmark, and I know that it can happen. At the end of the day, you know, whether you're captain or not, the first thing that comes first is your performances, and, you know, and that's what you've got to concentrate on.
Yeah, no, well, thank you for your answer there, and thank you for joining myself and Grant on Red Tinted Glasses for previewing the game. Do you want to give us a thought? Do you think Aberdeen will have too much overall over the two legs, or?
You know what? Yeah, I think they will. I mean, it's obviously a bit of because of Stephen coming in, and you know, I mean, I don't know exactly how they're going to approach the game, but it's what the starting 11 is going to be. So, you know, that me it makes it a little bit more of of the unknown. But yeah, I would say so. I think they do enough at home to make sure that they go through.
Yeah, well, perfect, David. We really appreciate you giving up your time this evening, and yeah, all the best for the future.
Thank you, Dennis. Thanks a lot.
No worries.
Thank you. Well, Grant, that was David Preece there, kindly joining us on tonight's episode of Red Tinted Glasses. Again, thanks to you for reaching out and getting David to join us. Really helpful, I think. Well, I've certainly found it helpful, and hopefully those of you tuning in have found it helpful. Just giving us a bit of insight into opposition that we probably wouldn't know much about otherwise.
Yeah, absolutely, Glenn. I think it's important that we get a perspective of the team or teams that Aberdeen could face in the past, and also some of the styles of football that we maybe don't know an awful lot about then, that we maybe do a little bit more now. And David, obviously, with first-hand experience of being involved over in Sweden, certainly gave us that, and that, no doubt about that.
Yeah, and there's one of the players he told us to watch out for, Patrick Valamark, getting on the score sheet to put Hacken 3-2 up. Seems quite an eventful game that they're involved in just now, but shows that, you know, that's 5 goals in 2 games, that they're certainly going to pose plenty of threats, but equally, like I said, you know, still failing to keep a clean sheet. That's 2 conceded tonight. You know, it will be interesting to see how that game opens up. And David's given us the benefit of his Swedish knowledge. We're going to try and dissect our local knowledge on all things Aberdeen. And, as David kind of touched on, we're not really sure how Aberdeen are going to line up for this game, but why don't we give it a try, Grant?
Yeah, I think some of the additions that Stephen Glass has brought into the club, Glen, been really interesting. There's been obviously some connections from Atlanta, obviously, that he has brought in, which I'm sure we'll touch on. But it's also went with some Premiership experience as well. And I think the experience side of things will be very key to take. Yeah,
so let's have a look at them then, Grant. So the first signing, just the way I've got them written down, we're not going to go in signing order because I'm not as prepared as that. So the first signing I've got down is J. Emmanuel Thomas, strengthening our goal scoring options, something we severely lacked on last season. Bagged his first goal for the club against Inverness. Apparently, I spoke to the ref in that game, so a close friend of mine. Apparently said it was a fantastic volley. Unfortunately, Red TV has still not put up any highlights, so we can't see it for ourselves. But that's great for a striker to get into a new club and get on the goal-scoring trail already.
Absolutely. You want to get off to a good start, pre-season, you want to hit the ground running. I thought Emmanuel Thomas was one of Livingston's best players last season from the time he played. I mean, for a big fella, he's got a bit of pace about him. He's got power that I think Aberdeen can utilise. He can run with the ball, but also they can go a bit more direct to him as well. I think he could be a bit of an all-rounder. And if played to his strengths, he could be a really big signing for Aberdeen. No question about that.
Yeah, and then so from a known signing in Jet to a little bit more of an unknown signing, Jack Gurr from Atlanta 2, coming in on a 1-year deal. Now, he's coming in as a right-back. It's probably, let's be fair to say, it's received a bit of mixed news on social media around that signing. A signing certainly Stephen Glass has had to defend, given the whole Ronnie Hernandez situation. Listening to Malcolm Panton's interview of Stephen Glass at full time against Cali, he's apparently a player that did well. But I suppose the jury is going to remain out for the fans to see how he plays. Now, by all accounts, it's possibly a position that we might see him start against Hacken.
I think right back has often been an area for Aberdeen in the past where we've been really reliant on people like Shea Logan to do a very effective job. And, as good as Logan was and as consistent as Logan was for a period of time, there was shades in games where he would lose a little bit of concentration or lose a goal on that side of the pitch. And that would always be something that I would be wary about. I agree with you entirely. I think it's a little bit of an unknown quantity that we're dealing with here. By all accounts, he's been well respected over in the States. Intrigued to see, as I said, how Glass play him. Does he play him as an out-and-out right back, or does he play him as a wing back in almost like a 5 or a 3? That could be an interesting dynamic to keep an eye on.
Yeah, and certainly from those of you that maybe watch YouTube highlights of new signings will know that he's a maybe an attacking-minded right back. He's popped up with lots of assists. He likes to get the ball in the box. And with strikers like Jet and hopefully Ramirez on the end of these chances, but we need to see more chances created because chances create goals, something, again, we've touched on there, we severely lacked on last season. Now, you touched on it, Grant, Premiership experience. Scott Brown comes with bags of that, 14 years at Celtic, plenty of titles under his belt, but also Declan Gallagher, the Motherwell captain. So that's 2 teams' captains we've got and signed. How vital will that sort of experience not only be for the Premiership season, but for this European tie coming up?
Oh, I think it's absolutely huge. I mean, you've got a player there, as you mentioned, in Scott Brown, who's won championship after championship after championship with Celtic, won cups, been competing on the highest stages of Europe. He has in abundance. He's a big game player. You got Declan Gallagher, who's obviously been ripping it up on the international stage for Scotland, was a big player in getting us to the European Championships in that fantastic night in Serbia. There's no doubt that those guys come with experience, but they also still have quality as well. Scott Brown maybe goes under the radar in the quality stakes, but he does do the simple things well. And I think that will certainly help a lot of the younger midfielder guys in the team really come on, I think. And I think he'll be a very important voice in the dressing room as well, something that I think Aberdeen have lacked in the past. I still think maybe Brown is definitely coming into the twilight years of his career, and maybe he will play every single match of the season, but there is no doubt in my mind that Aberdeen needed a couple of new voices in the dressing room. There's a lot of guys there that had maybe been around at the club maybe a little bit longer than most. And I think maybe a freshness can only be a good thing. I mean, I think Gallagher will bring a lot of experience, obviously, from his time at Motherwell, and obviously, Brown will certainly maybe help guys like Ross McCrory. If Lewis Ferguson means of the club, it could push him on a little bit more as well.
Dean Campbell's been...
Absolutely. Just improving these guys as well. And even guys that are there all the time as well, like Niall McGinn. Niall McGinn obviously knows Scott Brown from his time at Celtic. Have a little bit of a swan song. Johnny Hayes. Yeah. That might help as well. So I think that's important as well. And, there's one guy we have not mentioned there who probably might not get a lot of games this season, but you just never know. Funso Ojo, he's obviously coming back. Bit of a point to prove after going out on loan under McInnes. He'll be confident a bit to try and get into this team. Maybe under the discussion of Brown and a little bit of a leadership there, he might kick on as well. So it's going to be an interesting dynamic to see, particularly how the Brown one works, but also Gallagher in defence, because I think sometimes central defensively, especially last season, I thought Aberdeen were a little bit unconvincing. Consider a lot of floppy goals towards the end of last season, and someone like Gallagher might make a big difference.
Yeah, and it's some good points you made there. And I think for those of you that are returning and tuning in once again to Red Tinted Glasses, obviously, thank you for your continued support. Make sure you're subscribing to us on YouTube. Subscribe and follow wherever you're listening to the episode. And you can also follow us on Twitter at RTG Podcast. But for those of you that are maybe new to the show and this is your first time listening, you'll have probably missed myself and Calum bemoaning the lack of drive, the lack of determination, that kind of enforcement that we seem to miss in midfield, and we needed that midfield to kind of influence the game. And when we didn't have that influence, kind of that period after the whole McCrory Ferguson under 21 COVID saga, we lost that little bit of fight in midfield. And whenever we didn't have that, games passed us by.
Yes.
Scott Brown is not going to let games pass him by. Well, I'd certainly hope not, given what we've seen of him before. I kind of agree with your point, maybe coming to the twilight. I don't know if he'll play week in, week out, but again, listening to that interview of Stephen Glass about what the friendly was like, apparently from the first minute, Scott Brown was shouting at everybody, no game's a friendly to him. That's the sort of attitude we want to see on and off the pitch, get that fight installed into players and get them motivated from the first minute right up to the last, no excuses. But Declan Gallagher also, excellent point on the international stage. Unfortunate not to feature at the Euros, I thought. I thought he might have come on for Grant Hanley in that last game against Croatia. I was very surprised to see Scott McKenna come on in his place instead. But we saw what an excellent partnership him and Andy Considine struck up at international level. Could we see that as our centre-half pairing going into this season? And, young Jack McKenzie flourished last season in his role at left-back. Will we see him and Johnny Hayes as the alternate in the left-back, wing-back role? And a solid partnership of Considine Gallagher? There's maybe some reservations from some of you around that, given the age or potential pace of that centre-back pairing. But again, a pairing that comes with experience.
I think when you look at some of the younger players, you mentioned McKenzie there. You got Calvin Ramsey as well, who I thought did very well in the cup game last season against Dumbarton. Yeah. I get the impression that Stephen Glass has a couple of options in terms of how he wants to set his teams up. Does he go for youth and a kind of pace down the wings, a little bit of quality down there, or does he go for that maybe a bit more experience, that sort of tactical nous about him? And I think it's going to be an interesting dynamic to see how that shifts throughout the season. But you mentioned there about Brown and Gallagher, and I know particularly there's a lot of question marks still about Brown. I know a lot of Aberdeen fans, myself to an extent included, were a little bit uncertain about Brown coming to Aberdeen because of obviously past histories and obviously the fact that Brown maybe lost his appetite a little bit at Celtic. Personally, I thought obviously last season on the situation with Celtic, maybe he had lost his drink a little bit. I think I speak on behalf of all Aberdeen fans here. If these guys put in 100% week in, week out, put in quality performances, give assured, confident displays and help the team drive forward, I think that's all we can ask for.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that totally. And I think, the point you made about the improvement of players, you even listened to Dean Campbell's interview towards the back end of last season, him speaking about how he's looking forward to learn off of Scott Brown this season. So that experience will hopefully benefit our younger players. And I think what you touched on there is that's something that Stephen Glass is going to look to do this season. He said in the interview with Stephen Gunn, the director of football, that the squad was nearly done. A bit reserved on that, but it seems to me that, we're going to be spending more time integrating youth into the season. And, if they come out and said, look, the squad's done, we're going to trust the youth players along with the experience, perfect, let's get on board with that. As long as they come out and state that, because I think if they don't, if they said, look, transfer business is done, folk are going to go, oh my God, the squad's 2 or 3 short here and there. But if they state, look, we are investing in the youth, we're going to give them that chance, fans would support that, in my personal opinion.
I agree.
But another youth player that we've kind of invested in is a loanee from Brighton, highly rated winger Teddy Jenks has come in. We saw last season how good and vital a player Ryan Hedges was, the Welsh wizard with a hairband that many of you will have enjoyed me wearing, even though I don't need a hairband. But just how vital, with how much we missed Ryan when he was injured, is having that extra attacking option there.
Well, I think Hedges was Aberdeen's best player by an absolute country mile last season. I thought when he played on a consistent basis and he was playing well, Aberdeen, in my opinion, were A, better team with him, and B, they didn't lose many games when he was playing. I think Jenks is actually a sign that I'm actually most excited about of the new signings. I think of the fact that he's being at a club in Brighton who, he's obviously worked with Graham Potter, who obviously has got, David's obviously mentioned earlier on in the earlier part of the show about the Swedish footballing mentality, and obviously worked that at Ostersunds. I think the fact that Jenks has kind of built on that philosophy that Potter has at Brighton, that might be a very interesting move. And obviously he will have learned a lot from experienced players at the club like Lewis Dunk. I think that would be a very important player there. I see him more as a, you mentioned there, he'd probably play out wide. You look at people in that Brighton team that, played with a bit of pace, like Trossard last season, certainly had that. There's one I could think of. And he's one that I think, if he gets off to a good start, he could be one that I think the fans could take to very, very quickly. And he's one that I'm personally looking forward to seeing.
Yeah, and I think one that, to use your words there, the ones that fans have taken to very quickly without having seen him in action is the new number 9, Christian Ramirez, taken in from Houston Dynamo, dubbed the Superman by the Minnesota United fans. Nice to see us obviously exploiting the American market or markets abroad. I think the American market's pretty obvious why we're working in that, given Stephen Glass's connections, but also Alan Russell's connections. Many of you might forget that Alan Russell spent time in America and has worked and certainly played against Christian Ramirez in the past. From all accounts, he apparently scored in that fixture that on Thursday when they played against the under-18s. I'm not sure how he got on. The initial game against Cove that the team were supposed to play, they got postponed due to Cove's COVID situation. They did play an inter-club 11v11. I don't know how he fared in that, but certainly, Johnny Hayes seemed to be providing a lot of balls in for Ramirez, according to the match report. Are you excited by that signing?
I'm a bit more sceptical than most about this, actually. I think, the fact that Glass has given Ramirez the number 9 shirt, I think could be a big, it could be a help to him, it could be a hindrance to him, depending how he gets off and running. I've said in the past that when you wear the number 9 shirt for Aberdeen, you are expected to score goals. The past Adam Rooney is the one guy that I can think of who, wore that shirt and thrived wearing that number 9 shirt. And really, since Rooney, who else has done it? Sam Cosgrove, one season, yes. But, not really anybody else consistently over a period of time has done that job well. But I've just got Ramirez's stats in front of me, Glenn. The seasons at Houston Dynamo, 2019, 2020, 21, 5 goals, 2 goals and 1 goal. That is a bit concerning for me. Yes, he only played 10, 15 and 6 matches respectively in those 3 seasons. But that worries me a little bit. I know he obviously played for LA as well, but again, goal scoring numbers just 3 and 8, and then 4 and 17. So that concerns me a bit. It'll be interesting how Glass plays him. Does he see him as a strike partner with Jet, or does he see him as a solitary number 9 in a kind of 3 up front or a false 9? That's the dynamics I'm interested to see as well. Because if he plays the latter, I think that could be a problem. But if he plays with Emmanuel Thomas as a 2, that could be intriguing as well. But you mentioned obviously there about Hayes and McGinn, and I also mentioned Hedges as well. As always with strikers, they need support, both from wing, so from carriers in midfield as well. If he gets that, he could thrive. But if he doesn't, he could struggle.
Yeah. Now, I'm just going to counter your... I'm not going to call it negativity because it's fact, what you've produced there on Ramirez. Let's remember when we signed Simon Church, his goal-scoring record was pretty rotten. I was very public on my views on that, and it's fair to say he proved a lot of us wrong by getting and hitting the ground running. I do think for strikers in general, it is important that they go and hit the ground running and get goals. So to see Jet get a goal early on in his career for Aberdeen, okay, it's a pre-season friendly, but by all accounts, as we said earlier, it was an apparent screamer of a goal. That'll do his confidence. Stephen Glass said that Ramirez had scored in the earlier game against the under-18s. So, okay, it's against the under-18s, but at the end of the day, scoring breeds confidence, and hopefully we'll see that come through against Reading and St Johnstone, who we face later on this week. As I said, we're recording this on Monday night. But I'm all for that signing, just that positivity, enthusiasm he's got for being at the club, playing for the club. I've been speaking to you throughout the Euros, and, the thought of Aberdeen was very much an afterthought. Yes. I was invested in the Euros. But once Scotland got knocked out and once the tournament was winding down, I tuned into his interviews, and, even on his social media, this is an opportunity he was desperate for, and he's grabbing with both hands. So I'm fully ready to support him in that journey. It almost feels that you feel like you're invested in it yourself. But it's refreshing as well to hear players being enthusiastic about playing for the club. Even look at Jets. Snapchat, their golf day out at Donald Trump was hilarious. Andy Constantine, for those of you that haven't watched, saying that Titanic turns quicker than him. Perfect. There seems to be, and as someone put it, I think, a bond within this squad that's been generated similar to that of the bond that kind of the players had in Derek McInnes's first season. Yes. And if we can certainly create on footballing terms, we can create something similar to that. Hey, I don't think many of us will be complaining come April, May time.
Yeah, I think you make some really great points on Ramirez, and I've really enjoyed his social media activities, particularly I think they did the one on Twitter when he was at the airport. I thought that was particularly cool. But listen, I think you're absolutely right. I think with every striker, wherever club they go, they just need to get up and running, and if they get up and running early, that can make a difference. There's no doubt in my mind that Alan Russell will improve Jet and Ramirez. Yeah. If given the time to do so. And this is the thing, it's about will the fans appreciate and allow Glass et al. To give that time to the squad. If they don't get off to a good start, there could be a bit of problems there. But if they start well, particularly in this European game, by the way, will definitely help. No question.
Yeah, and obviously this is the game we're previewing the European game. I know we're kind of deviating a little bit, but European football is vitally important to a club like Aberdeen. I would have said financially, but I'm not sure how the financial benefits will be this year, given the pandemic that we are still in and the restraints that we could see on crowds. Obviously, that was affected us last year. But just how important is this game? David touched on it earlier in the episode. How important is this game to not only Stephen Glass, but the club as well in building that momentum, getting into Dundee United? Because I know, again, like I said, we're deviating a little bit. We've got a favourable run at the start of our league campaign, so we need to be building momentum in Europe.
I think just winning games breeds confidence. When you're playing well, when you're winning games, the confidence grows all the time. And I think these early games going into a season, you want to try and build a structure. You want to try and build a bit of fluency in the team. You don't want to look a little bit disjointed early on, because if you do, you're already playing catch up. You mentioned the favourable fixtures. I don't think any fixtures is favourable if you're not playing well. How many times in the past have Aberdeen, gone into a season with a favourable fixture list and got off to a bad start? I'm nearly 30 and I've seen that quite a lot, and that's certainly something that I would be worried about. But I think the fact that we're now playing in a new European tournament, obviously the Europa Conference League, I think there's in my opinion, I think there'll be a lot of intrigue and a lot of interest about that. I think personally, for nations like Scotland and other smaller nations, the Europa Conference League is actually very important, because it will give these clubs in their respective leagues a bit more exposure and give them a little bit of an opportunity to progress, to maybe aspire to qualify up the European ladder tree, whatever you want to call it. I mean, we're obviously saying, the fact that the Champions League is looking to maybe get 2 clubs into Scotland. The coefficient is improved every year. You look obviously the job that, St Johnstone did last season, winning the 2 cups. You look at Hibs and the way they're progressing. Aberdeen need to keep going, but they also need to do it in a way that is pragmatic and gets results as well. So I think this is actually a really big game, this Hacken game. And they have to start the game well, because, it's a big game for Hacken as well. They'll be seeing it as a bit of an opportunity to progress up, not only their own league and their own kind of exposure, but also up their own sort of European ladder tree as well. So it's a big game for both teams.
Yeah, and David's certainly done a good job in identifying the threats that they'll pose to us, but hopefully we've managed to identify threats that we can pose to them in the likes of Hedges, Jet, and we've certainly got pace, that I think we should be able to exploit teams at this season. Now, we touched on with David there about the Gary Woods, Joe Lewis situation. Who would you personally like to see as number 1 this season?
I think Joe Lewis starts the opening game against Hacken in Europe. I just think that with his big game experience, with his leadership, with the fact that he can be a match winner, regardless of whether he, was captain or not, Joe Lewis is still a very good quality goalkeeper. Yes, he didn't have his best season last season, and he could make a few more mistakes than usual. But for me, he's still a very good keeper. I think Gary Woods is a good number 2, and I think Gary Woods, when he deputised for Joe Lewis, I thought personally did fairly okay. And I think what Stephen Glass will be wanting for both his keepers is a high level of competition, because, too often last season, and I was very critical of this myself, when a goalkeeper makes mistakes, and David mentioned this earlier on, and obviously talks about this on a regular basis, goalkeepers need help from their defence, of course they do. It's all about concentration as well, and I think sometimes, if you're not going through a great spell, if there's that little bit of a, burden with the fact that obviously Lewis was the captain last season, that can play an effect. And obviously we mentioned John Bleasdale's question earlier on, which I think was very important. I think personally the captaincy did affect Joe Lewis last season. I think that. I do think that Aberdeen missed that leadership in the middle of the pitch, and certainly centrally throughout the team. I thought there was a disjointedness there. So I think Joe starts the Hacken game. Does he start the first game of the season against Dundee United in the league? I don't know. But I do think what might happen is we may see a shift in pattern in the goalkeepers a lot more than we have seen in the past under Derek McInnes.
Yeah, and then I suppose kind of follow up that John that raised, obviously asked about the captaincy affecting Joe Lewis, which we posed to David earlier in the show, but he also kind of wanted our thoughts on the captaincy as a whole for Aberdeen going forward. Who do you think will be captain next season? Just one word, let's go with.
I want it to be Declan Gallagher, but I think Scott Brown will get the captaincy.
See, that's interesting. I think it will be Scott Brown, but my nervousness around it being Scott Brown is that he is being signed as a coach as well.
Yes.
So how does your captain being your coach work into the whole system? Although I don't know if you'll be listening, Finlay Park posed in one of our group chats that if you then made a Declan Gallagher or a Constantine, I've seen his name being thrown about for a potential captain, if you have one of these guys as captain, you've then got their voice, Scott Brown's voice, and Stephen Glass's voice. That's 3 different voices in the changing room. Does that become too many? So interesting to see how that one plays out.
I'm going to be controversial here. I don't think Andy Considine should be captain. And the reason I say that is because Andy Considine has been ingrained in the Aberdeen FC network of the club for far too long. And I've nothing against Andy Considine. He's a great servant to the club. But I said at the time when Derek McInnes left on social media, I was very vocal on this. I did think Aberdeen needed a different voice. I think it needed to change of direction. And I think the best way to do that is obviously you're trying to change the dynamic of the club, obviously, with bringing in Stephen Glass and bringing in a host of new players. You know, you either go for a bit more of a younger option, one, which I think could be a little bit more difficult. You know, maybe someone like Ross McCrory might be one that I'd be kind of looking at as a bit of an outside camp. But for me, you go with a different voice who has a bit of experience of winning, a bit of experience in big matches. I think Gallagher matches that mould. I really do. And the problem I have, the only question mark I have with Gallagher is his fitness. You know, he was out for a period of time. His form at the end of Motherwell's season was a little bit up and down.
Yeah, well, it's funny because the Motherwell fans seem to hint that the captaincy affected his performance.
Yeah,
so it'll be interesting to see how that one plays out.
Well, last point on that, Glenn, before we move on, is whoever does get the captaincy, I think the Aberdeen fans need to rally together and get behind him. You know, as I said before, I'm not particularly a Scott Brown lover, but if he is captain of the club, of course I'll back him. But you know, it's going to be an interesting dynamic to see what happens. It's a big decision for Stephen Glass. I think it could be one of his biggest decisions of the season.
Now, we'll just kind of go on towards the final point of the episode. We touched on the importance of strikers getting goals early for their confidence. Goals is what you obviously need to win ties, but we also need to be keeping clean sheets. Just how important in this tie is it not only to take a lead to Sweden, but hopefully be taking a clean sheet to Sweden as well?
I think it's more important now because of the fact the away goals have been scrapped. The fact that you know, we can go away to Sweden with a victory of some description. So that takes a little bit of the jeopardy away of the fact that if we did concede, then we'd have to score over there. So that said, it does take away that little bit of jeopardy. But of course, you have to win the game at home first. And that poses the question mark I have. You know, there have been campaigns where Aberdeen have played. I can think of Siroki Brieg as one game I can think of where they got in front, but they didn't see the game out and it finished 1-1. You obviously had the match with I can't remember the team now, but we won over there 2-1. Rovaniemi. We really struggled against them. You know, but in the past when we have got off to a good start, you know, we've blown teams away like we did when we played Daugava Riga many years ago.
Although, let's be honest, that was a bit of a fixed game. We later found out.
Well, I have to say, I thought Fort William had more chance of scoring that than Daugava Riga, but never mind. But what I will say, Glenn, is, you know, I said this earlier on, you know, this is a tricky game for Aberdeen. This is a big banana skin game. And I don't want to put the Joners on this game, but every time Aberdeen play around my birthday, which is coming up at the end of this month, they don't win. You know, the Kairat Almaty game, they didn't win that game. On my 18th birthday, they got thrashed 5-1 by Sigma Olomouc. You know, it was an awful 18th birthday. So I go into this game with a lot more trepidation than maybe some Dons fans. Maybe a lot of Dons fans are very worried about the game. I think Aberdeen need to get off to a good start. I do think they need to go to Sweden with an advantage. But even if they do go ahead with the advantage, as you said earlier on, with the fan dynamic over there, the fact that we probably won't be allowed to take fans over to Sweden, that could be interesting. So it's even more crucial that Aberdeen go to Sweden with the lead.
Yeah, I'm certainly sceptical ahead of this game, maybe more so after hearing David's thoughts on the game.
And hopefully not more so after hearing my memories.
I know. But I think the way that Stephen Glass is going to get us playing this season, he certainly wants an attacking brand of football. We saw it towards the end of the last season in spells. You know, the Celtic game in particular stands out. Okay, we didn't get the result at the end, but that style of play, the aggressive press, expansive, to use a word that David made earlier, you know, that sort of style that will be attractive on the eye and hopefully produces goals, but it might leave us vulnerable at the back, and hopefully we can shore up that defence this season. And I think being at home first, we said, away goals don't count, but I still think for us, especially if we can get some form of fans into Pittodrie, that home advantage will be massive for us first up. And hopefully we can, I'm going to say we'll maybe take a 2-goal lead over Sweden. There's me being sceptical. We're going to take a 2-goal lead to Sweden. I'm
going to go 2-1 Aberdeen. I don't think we'll keep a clean sheet, but I do think we will narrowly win the game. I actually think it could be a very good game. Whether we'll win it over the 2 legs, we'll wait and see. But I think if we get a positive result, I'll be more confident. But if we don't, I'm not so sure.
Yeah, well, that's myself and Grant's thoughts on the game. As we've said, if you are tuning in, watching on YouTube, we hope you've enjoyed the video today. Make sure you give us a wee like and subscribe if you've not already. Why don't you leave us your thoughts on the game, maybe what your score prediction is going to be in the comments below. And Calum, I know maybe some of you have missed him on the episode today, we'll be back with myself on Thursday night or Friday after the first leg to do a full review and look ahead to the second leg. And we'll be back with Calum as well, doing a full pre-season preview ahead of the men's season, kicking off against Dundee United at home, where I'm delighted to announce that we will be joined not only by Robbie Hanratty, but the AFC women captain Kelly Forrest, who will join us to look back on the successful season that they've had. So again, if you want to make sure that you're receiving the episode first, make sure you subscribe with notifications on, or subscribe and follow us wherever you are listening to this episode. And just left to say, Grant, thanks very much for not only joining me, giving your thoughts, but also once again for getting David on the show as well.
My pleasure. I've really enjoyed it, Glenn. Thanks for having me on.
And I suppose we should end as well by saying, where can those of you that are tuning in find Campbell's Footballs?
You can find Campbell's Footballs on Apple, Spotify, Anchor FM, wherever you listen to your podcast. You can also find me, Stato_Grant on Twitter, or StatoG91 on Instagram for all the crack.